Hey team, welcome back. Today I want to talk about saving money while you're building commander decks and how to share staples that are expensive between those decks. Why would you even want to do that, and how would you want to do that? So first, why? When I first started playing Commander, I was obsessed with putting decks together. At first I only started with one, and I think now I'm currently up to 6 with 2 more in the works. Magic doesn't have to be expensive, but it can be expensive when you're looking for specific staple cards that everyone wants. Those really popular cards that just happen to be really expensive. And really expensive can be subjective. To me, anything over $10 to $20 is really expensive. If I can avoid it, especially for Commander, where you only need one of each card, I only want to buy one of each card. I don't want to have multiple decks with expensive staples in them when I can be spreading out my money buying other staples. And another reason you might want to do this is maybe you have a really unique version of just one card that you love in particular. For instance, this is the Invention version of Hangerback Walker, and I love this version of the card. So whenever I play it in any of my Commander decks, I want to use this version because it's the most special to me. So now let's get a bird's eye view so I can show you how I do that between my different Commander decks. So here's how I share staples between Commander decks. I've got a couple one-of staples up here. I've got Doubling Season, Parallel Lives, and Polyraptor. These two you'll recognize for any kind of token deck, and Polyraptor is also can be used for a token deck due to its ability, but also goes in dinosaurs. So here's 3 decks that I have. I have Blex Vexing Pest. This is a pest type token deck. I've got Xavier Sol. This is also a token and counters sort of deck. And then I have Pentlaza, which is just straight dinosaurs. Now, I want to share Polyraptor between both of these because being able to populate a second Polyraptor is extremely powerful, and it just naturally goes in dinosaurs. Similarly, I want to be able to use Parallel Lives in Xavier Sol and Blex, and I also want to be able to use Doubling Season in both of these decks, but I don't want to buy multiples of these cards because they're so pricey, right? So what I've done is I've got my singletons up here, and there's a couple ways that you can do it. Now, if you want to, you can just sleeve them up like normal and put them into each deck. Make sure that you have a list and constantly replace it into each deck depending on how and what you're playing that week. I don't love that option, even though that's what I started doing. The next option is, for instance, we can create a sort of placeholder card. Now, this is just a Planes that I wrote Doubling Season with the casting cost on there. I know what Doubling Season does, so I don't need any of the details. You can do this and put this into one of your decks, and that's what I have done for any deck that cares about Doubling Season. So I put it into both Xavier Sol and Infested Captain. Okay. Similarly, with Polyraptor, I have put that also into Xavier Sol and Pentlaza, just like that. However, these are kind of ugly, and maybe you want to do something a little prettier. If your card happens to exist in an art card form, right, you can put this into your deck so that, you know, when you're holding your hand of cards, it looks like this. It's a little bit prettier, and I think it's a little bit more fun. This is what I'm starting to do for the cards that exist. Unfortunately, I don't think Polyraptor has an art card yet, but I can use another dinosaur to represent him and maybe just scribble on there. But that's another version that you can do. So, for instance, if you were playing like this, you would pay, you know, your casting cost for Doubling Season. You would put it onto the field, and then I have a little box here of my expensive singletons that I carry with me when I do Commander off to the side, and I would just go through and say, okay, there's my Doubling Season, and just put it on top of the card. Similarly, for any permanent that you had, you know, if it was a creature, you know, you could tap it, whatever, but you just put the placeholder onto the field, and then you put your actual card on top of it. And I've never had opponents have an issue with this. None of them have asked me about it, honestly. And maybe they realized what I'm doing because cards are so expensive, and it makes it much easier to share cards between decks just by doing something as simple as that. Just having a placeholder and casting the placeholder and then putting your singleton in your little case or whatever you want onto the field. Perfect. So now let's talk about non-permanent cards. It's plenty easy when your card just exists on the field for a while, but what about non-permanents? Things like sorceries and instants. I have a Beseech the Mirror here as an example, and I love this card. It's very useful. I could cast this with Bargain and summon up a Parallel Lives without paying its mana cost. Extremely powerful card. But I don't want to buy multiples of these. I don't want to trade for multiples of these when I could be using that value to trade for something else, right? So I've only got one Beseech the Mirror. What do you do in that case? Well, unfortunately, the answer is kind of, I guess, ugly. You can do the exact same thing where you have an insert card. For instance, I have an insert card for a Demonic Tutor that looks pretty much just like this, just written on a blank land card that I can insert into any deck. And similarly, you can tap, play it, and then with your table questioning what are you doing with that, you can take your Demonic Tutor, in my case, out of your box and put it and say I'm playing Demonic Tutor, and then you put it back in and then move that to your graveyard. Now that's not a great way to do things. I do think it's ugly and it's very bulky, to be like I'm playing a sorcery, there's my sorcery, and then put it back. But I don't have a good answer at this time. That's the best I've come up with, is just using an insert card like I showed you, playing your sorcery, and then putting it back in the box. For now, I've restricted Beseech to just one deck, so this is only going to be in one deck for now. I really don't like the inserts for sorceries and instants. And I think that's pretty much it. That is my why and my how of saving money when I build commander decks, and how I share staples between multiple decks. Just as an example, I guess, since I'm ending the video, I'll show you a few more of my staples that I share between different decks so that I don't have to buy multiples. Again, some of these cards, there are cheaper versions available, and some of these cards I just like the version I have so much that I just want to play with that version. And it doesn't always have to be an expensive card. For instance, I think Millennium Calendar was, I think, like $10 when it first came out, but it's not very expensive now. I think it's only a couple dollars if you buy it online. But even so, that's a couple dollars that I can spend towards something else. So I could spend or trade to buy another Millennium Calendar, for instance, or I could spend or trade to get an Exsanguinate, which is that pay X, each opponent loses X, you gain X sorcery that I need for several decks. So that's just an example of why you would want to do that. If you have questions, feel free to leave them, but that's all I got, and I hope it helps you build your decks and build them at least a little bit more budget. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.